Și aș vrea să îi ofer cuvântul în primul rând domnului Panagis Vourloumis, care este Chief Executive Officer la OTE in Aten. Please, Mr. Vourloumis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Georgescu. I want to thank also you as an organizer and Mrs. Lika and everybody who has worked for this conference, which I'm sure will be very useful. Also, by coincidence, it's taking place on Tuesday the 13th, which is the day. We expect also some announcements from Brussels. My comments will concern the institution of regulation in telecoms and not any individual regulator. In fact, yesterday at a very nice dinner by Mr. Georgescu, in which some regulators were present, I asked for forgiveness in advance about what I'm going to say. As head of two regulated incumbents, it is natural that my views on the subject reflect the concerns of the regulated. Also, they reflect my personal opinion as a citizen and as an economist specialized in development, and I hope as a good European. I believe that it is useful for all voices to be heard on the subject, even if one runs the risk of being accused of prejudice. Regulation, the word itself, is a political statement. Once the idea is adopted, it becomes an empty shell, ready to receive any content which the powers that be choose to fill it with. In telecoms, the often Sibyllic dictates of Brussels are interpreted differently by member country regulators. Starting at one end from a laissez-faire attitude, we go to the other end of Napoleonic ambitions to radically reform the industry. Some regulators believe that they own the incumbents. In between, we have variations of dogmas, all claiming to be the right interpretations of Brussels, much as all Christian sects claim to be the true interpreters of the Gospels. It would be amusing if it was not so serious for the industry to follow the argument of whether there should be one all-powerful European super-regulator or not. A fight between European Union statism and local statism in the name of the interests of competition and the consumer. It really is a clash of ambitions and agendas. Regulation can be a serious threat to the industry, and I do not mean only to the incumbents. It is both at EU level and national levels, in most cases, a constitutional anomaly. Regulating authorities are bodies vested with the power to legislate, interpret the law, apply the law, be the judge and the executioner. They are financed by the taxpayer and are accountable to no one. At the time when democracy and accountability are considered the foundations of our system, we have legitimized bodies, not only in telecoms, which in many cases can act with impunity above the law. And regulation is about interests, and the regulator redistributes money, not his own. It is essential for the regulator's credibility not only to be, but also to appear impartial. I have given you a summary of my views about the weaknesses of the regulating industry as it is set up in Europe today, but I have no illusions. Regulation is here to stay. What must be done is to try to eliminate its weaknesses and to start by making it accountable and legally liable for its actions and for its mistakes. Not an easy task, but I'm glad to read that in the country that is hosting this conference, there is a lively debate on the subject. A similar debate is, I understand, taking place in the corridors of power in Brussels. However, things take time to change there, and in the meantime, there are some practical suggestions and comments on how the situation could be improved for the industry as a whole and for the competitiveness of Europe. Regulators should give up police attitudes where these exist and sit down with the incumbents and, where applicable, with the responsible ministries to decide on a long-term policy of telecom development. I want to say here how happy I am that the Romanian regulator, in fact, is doing that. They should do this in each separate country and then at European level. I suggest that large companies, as the incumbents are, listed in stock exchanges, follow much more transparent procedures than most regulators. And treating these companies with consideration and listening to their views would be very productive. In many cases, today, this does not happen. Incumbents are regarded with suspicion and considered guilty in advance. Indeed, regulation in Europe has imposed its own negative way of thinking and looking at the industry, even on some incumbents. But incumbents possess enormous know-how and are powerful development engines in an economy, in an industry which requires very deep pockets and must take big risks because of technological change. It is to everyone's interest for the incumbent to be treated not as a whale which will be fed to the sharks. The countries that have understood this have the best results and the healthiest industries. Very large investments need careful planning, heavy financing, and take a long time to be implemented and bear fruit. The business risks are considerable. If a regulatory risk is added to the investment, then the investment may not be worth it. A regulatory certainty, a stable horizon, is absolutely necessary for investment. Uncertainty is poison for planning. We now have to contend with the scarecrow of functional or structural or whatever separation. It is a reasonably sounding theoretical proposal to make eggs out of an omelette. It does not tell us how, of course. As Brussels does not seem so enthusiastic about it anymore, they are passing the buck to the local boys. Be nice or I will chop you up. How conductive is this to a productive dialogue? Even if the idea could have merit, in some cases, the way it is being served kills it. Not all countries are the same. In some, fixed lines cover almost 100%. In others, like Romania, less than 25%. In some, like Britain, regulation and the free market has been around for decades. In others, it is new. Some markets, such as Germany, Italy, France, Britain, are very big. Others are small or even tiny, like Cyprus and Malta. In most countries, the industry developed before the regulator came in. Often, it developed in an anarchic way. In some countries, like Greece and Germany, the incumbent is still suffering from legally imposed rigidities which raise their cost of operation. Rigidities which do not exist for their competitors.